I don't think that we should expect anything good from China over the next 4 years. We need to be acting to reinforce our allies in the region, and we need to be making sure that they understand that America is strong and willing to fight back against their aggression.
You're watching Restoring America, where we shine a light on the fundamental values of this country and all the reasons why they're worth saving. This week, we're going to talk about the dangers America faces on the world stage and what the incoming Trump administration will have to do to confront them. I'm Kayla McGee-White, and this is Restoring America. One of President Donald Trump's most compelling arguments on the campaign trail was that, under his first administration, Americans weren't worried about foreign conflict. It turns out that no new wars is a pretty persuasive message when half of the world is on fire. But the conflict that has broken out overseas under the Biden administration, both in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East, along with the looming threat of an invasion into Taiwan by China, will not simply disappear as soon as Trump re-enters the White House. He will inherit the Biden administration's foreign policy failures, and it will be up to him to mitigate them. Of the utmost concern is the growing collaboration between Iran, Russia, and China, our three biggest foreign adversaries. In Ukraine, for example, some of the weapons being used by the Russians were sent by Iran and made in China. Trump has made it clear he has no interest in further entangling the U.S. in this conflict beyond what is necessary. But the U.S. will still have some role to play in the affairs of the world. The only question is, how big should that role be? My guest today is going to explain more about what to expect as we approach the end of the Biden administration. But before we get to him, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. And for more, head to WashingtonExaminer.com. With me today is Michael Lucchese, the founder and CEO of Pipe Creek Consulting, an associate editor in Law and Liberty, and a contributing editor at Providence. Michael, thanks so much for joining us today. You have written a lot about the growing axis between Russia, Iran, and China. Now, after Donald Trump's election, China has come out with a statement saying that it hopes to have some sort of peaceful process of negotiating with the United States. Should we trust that they mean what they say, or what can we expect from China in the next several years?
Well, first of all, Kaylee, thanks for having me on. I don't think that we should expect anything good from China over the next 4 years. First, it's not been a peaceful last 4 years, right? They've increasingly been threatening Taiwan. There have been confrontations in the South China Sea with the Philippines, with India, election interference in this last election. The Chinese Communist Party has no peaceful intentions when it comes to the United States. That's not to say that war is inevitable or anything like that. I still think that deterrence can be restored, but this is just sort of diplomatic talk. We need to be acting like they are preparing to invade Taiwan. We need to be acting to reinforce our allies in the region, and we need to be making sure that they understand that America is strong and willing to fight back against their aggression.
And many would argue that China is the primary threat, but then we also have the problem of Russia and Iran and the significant issue of those three countries working together. What are some policies that the Trump administration did last time to help counter that threat? And are there any significant changes the next Trump administration should make in that regard?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is to move away from thinking of these regions as distinct theaters and start seeing the connections between them. The Chinese Communist Party is primarily a threat because it is an ideological threat, right? They say we have a better way of life than America, than the West, and we want to become a new global hegemon. And so they want to move the global system away from the US-led global order and towards a China-led global order. They don't have the same ideological goals necessarily as the radical Islamists in Iran or Vladimir Putin in Russia, but all three of these regimes agree that the United States is the problem on the global stage and want to erode our leadership. So I think the first step for the Trump administration is thinking through how do each of these threats interact with each other. So take Ukraine, for example. Many of the drones that Russia is firing at Ukraine and using to attack the Ukrainian civilian population are manufactured by Iran with Chinese components, right? And so these are really, I think, symbols of what these three powers are doing to attack America's allies and friends. North Korea also is, I think, a part of this growing axis, and they have troops who are literally on the ground fighting with Ukrainian troops at the moment. So I think the first step for the Trump administration is think through what do we need to make sure that we can degrade the connections between these rival powers. And I think a good example of something that they did well in the last administration is the Abraham Accords, right? Where they put Israel and the Arab states, two groups of people who are typically not seen as aligned necessarily, and they got them to understand that Iran is the real threat and that we need to work together to push back against Iran. I think we need to start doing that in other places too, in East Asia, in Europe, and I think that the alliance system is really America's strongest weapon against this Axis threat. I think the Trump administration did some good things last time with the alliance system. I think they did some bad things last time with the alliance system. We just have to make this the priority, I think, going forward.
And we know that Donald Trump and his new vice president, J.D. Vance, are far more isolationist than past Republicans would consider themselves. What are some of the downsides to that worldview, and are there any benefits to it in the next several years?
Yeah, so I think the thing about Trump and Vance and foreign policy is that it's all a little bit confused right now. We don't really know exactly who is going to come out on top when we're forming the second Trump administration cabinet. We don't know if it's going to be more mainstream conservatives or more new right isolationists. We're not sure about all of these questions yet. So it's hard to say. I think one thing that some of the more isolationist-leaning Republicans have been right about is we don't have enough resources to fight everywhere all the time, all at once, right? So I think that if they listen to people like Elbridge Colby, if they listen to other folks who are maybe pushing for some restraint and start thinking about defense production in that context, I think that might be a really good thing. The problem, I think, though, is if the isolationist faction in the next Trump administration winds up being the ones in the driver's seat, and they say Ukraine's not worth fighting for, Israel's not worth fighting for, even Taiwan is not worth fighting for, which is what some people in that faction have said, I think we're going to have this sort of Fortress America mentality that will see the basically total collapse of the global economic system, right? I think we're seeing right now with the Houthis in the Middle East, I think we're seeing just how fragile our supply chains are and just how susceptible to disruption they are by these global powers. The Houthis, of course, being backed by Iran and supported by Russia and China in certain respects too. And I think that if we take the foot off the gas a little bit and say, well, we can't do everything, so we're going to do nothing, right? I think we're going to wind up in a situation that's very, very bad for the American people, very bad for the global security situation, very bad for the economy. And so I hope that the people who surround President Trump this next go-around are more like John Bolton and maybe less like Rand Paul, let's say.
Important questions as we move through this transition over the next several months and the next few years. Michael, thanks so much for joining us today. And for more exclusive news, breaking news, and interviews, be sure to check out WashingtonExaminer.com.